Good morning, everyone. Mabuhay, kamusta kayo? Thank you so much for your time today. I'm very pleased to be here and to have the opportunity to share my view on what are the key traits of the future leader that will steward the future. One of the reasons I particularly enjoy this kind of event is the opportunity to network, to learn from each other, to share knowledge and experience. But there is one more reason why I'm very glad to be with you today. And that is the stated purpose of this event, to help and create and foster the future generation of leaders. Leaders who have an ambition to leave behind a world that is better than the world that they have met. Leaders who have a passion and a commitment to make decisions that will allow to have a lasting positive impact for the community we operate in, for the society in general, and for the environment. These are all topics I'm very passionate about, and you will see that probably even more as I continue with my presentation. But before I do that, I think it's worth for me to spend a few words just to tell you a little bit about my background. Hopefully that will help you to understand and to frame why I think what I'm going to say is important, an important trait for the future leader of tomorrow. Born and raised in Italy, as you can probably tell by my name and my accent, I have an engineering background, which probably gives me a very analytical and scientific approach to problem solving. Almost 20 years ago, I moved to Australia to further my studies with a Master in Business Administration. And today, I still call Australia home, even though I quite regularly visit my family. Hasn't been possible for the past couple of years due to COVID, but I'm looking forward to Christmas to see my family and spend time with friends. From a professional perspective, I spent pretty much all my career in management consulting, and I've had the luxury to do what I really love, which is helping clients to transform with purpose, using technology as a key enabler for that transformation. In my current role, I lead EY Consulting Sustainability Services across Asia Pacific. What that means is that I work and collaborate and coordinate multidisciplinary teams across Asia-Pacific countries, also working with our global experts and with partners to support clients in developing and delivering against ambitious sustainability agendas. What is included in there is a broad brush of topics. It goes from sustainable finance to sustainable risk management, to decarbonization, move to renewable, sustainable supply chain and transparency of supply chain. And the list keeps going. But I think that's enough with myself, and I really like to spend the next 15 minutes just to share with you a little bit of a story and take you on a journey. And we'll start by setting a scene. I will introduce a concept that Dr. Lim already mentioned, which is the concept of long-term value. I will spend a few words talking about the role of technology in delivering this long-term value. And I will bring to a conclusion by highlighting, as a summary of all of this discussion, what I think are the key characteristics of the future leaders. First things first, the stage that I want to set is a stage of a world that is changing at a very fast pace. Now, change is not new. It's been there from the dawn of times. It's part of human history. However, the change that we're witnessing today has accelerated at an exponential rate, and with it, the complexity of change. In there is the very first key messages and important trait for a leader of tomorrow, understanding that given the complexity and the pace of change, it is not possible to face the challenges that the world is proposing and giving us in isolation. And collaboration, building ecosystem and collaboration with partners is fundamental. Having set this stage, I would like to introduce a couple of concepts. Dr. Lim already mentioned and introduced one of these concepts, and that is the one of the social license to operate. Now, no longer organization can afford to only focus on profit and generation of profit for their owner. They're receiving a significant increase in pressure from society to justify their purpose, their reason to be. And the pressure comes from any direction to organization. It comes from their employees. It comes from consumers who purchase their product. It comes from institutional investors. And that leads to the second concept I captured on this slide, which is, and once again, Dr. Lim introduced it. It's the switch and the move from a shareholder capitalism toward a stakeholder capitalism. What does it mean? In a shareholder capitalism, the main, if not the only purpose of an organization is to create and generate value for its owner, the shareholders. The time frame, the horizon, is a short term. It's primarily driven by quarterly result, annual report. In the stakeholder capitalism, there is a much broader set of entities, stakeholders that organization need to deal with, and that encompasses entities within the organization, being the employees. Gen Z, as Dr. Lim mentioned before, is asking for something different that previous generations were asking or used to. There are suppliers that ask or are required to establish a long-term relationship to generate consistent value with organization. There are institutional vendors, there are organizations, there is academia, and all of that is putting significant pressure, a pressure that current society that is highly networked with social media, etc., require organization to take a stand like never before. The other key dimension of this stakeholder capitalism is the time frame or a time horizon. A number of the elements I just mentioned before, the reputation, the ability of organization to attract, to retain talent, or to establish long-lasting relationship with suppliers or clients, has a time dimension that goes beyond, way beyond the early view of the shareholder capitalism. Another way of looking at this is through the lens of the disruption and how important it is to establish and to build an organization that can resist and stand in front of continuous disruption. I'm sure all of you have daily experience day in, day out, both on a professional and a personal level, on what disruption can be. Disruption can come from technology. There was the example given before of how 50 years ago computer wasn't around, and now we all carry a computer in our pocket. But let's go beyond that. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Let's look at how entirely different business models are created by 3D printing, or the ability to work remotely, which is something that COVID will force us to do. Now, I found a very useful framework to look at this form of disruptions, to talk about and understanding underlying forces that explain in a way how this disruption comes about. The theory of megatrends postulates that there are four key primary forces, namely the globalization, the demographics, the technology, and the environment. They are not new. They've always been around for many, many years, from, once again, the beginning of times. However, they constantly evolve, and they evolve in waves. And the way these waves combine on each other results in new trends, which brings about disruption. Maybe using an example could help to visualize how this happens. Let's talk about new generation, a generation that is constantly interconnected via social media, a generation that is much more sensible to themes about climate change and human rights. It is no doubt that organizations that want to be relevant and want to be sustainable and continue to generate value for the longer term can not only focus on delivering value to their shareholders, but they need to account for the perception and their action or pollution that they generate or the impact that they have on the community will be received, accepted, or rejected by an increasing number of people that belongs to the newer generation. So what I found particularly relevant and useful in this way of looking is that not just important to look at how there is a shift from profit generation to creating value for people and planet and large, But this is a continuous evolution that requires to develop a change in mindset, and it requires the leaders of tomorrow to think how to be constantly on top and anticipate the change. So being a leader tomorrow and a leader today means anticipating in a way what the future may bring about, and to plot a way in a direction to achieve a future vision. There is a lot of theory in what I said, and I thought to introduce a slide to ground a little bit more and make it a little bit more relevant on the basis of surveys that EY does quite regularly with organizations across the globe. I try to summarize on this slide 4 key insights. They are relevant for and to continue on the discussion that we just had until now. The first one is the awareness that more and more institutional investors demand that organizations pay further attention to dimension on top of the financial pillar or the financial metrics, including environment impact, the board diversity, how do you attract and retain and develop capital within the organization. The second key message there is around the standards. There is an increased proliferation of standards for reporting along dimension of environment, social, and governance. Now, the good thing about this is the increase in pressure onto organization and onto the society to start paying more attention to dimensions that were not as relevant a few years back. However, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in that space. It was quite good at COP26, the announcement by the International Finance Reporting Standard that there has been an establishment of an international standard, sustainability standard board that will probably bring a little bit of structure and once again an enhanced pressure for organization to do things that matter to society in large and to stakeholders more than your traditional shareholders. The pressure comes also from employees. Working at EY, one of the priorities that we have, being people, our main asset, is how do we retain and how do we develop our key resources, our key staff. Now, that's not a small feat, as there is a significant turnover, and we know that organizations have more challenges to retain this capital if they make decisions and policy that are not aligned with the expectation that this new generation increasingly have, and they're pretty vocal about it. The last comment that I want to have on this slide is the last section of this slide. It talks about an awareness that is already out there as one of the insights from the survey that we conducted. CEO do understand the need to shift from a shareholder to a stakeholder view of value generation, so from a short-term to a long-term value generation. However, the main challenge that organizations today are facing is the how to, and moving from a strategy to an execution. There is lots to come, and I think some of the discussion that is happening now in Glasgow and all around the world is how do we convert all of those high-level targets into plans, and we really achieve and we plot the itinerary that will take us to the future vision that I was talking about just before. Another way to look at and to understand the importance of this, of focusing on pillars or generation of value beyond your traditional financials is a message that is captured in this slide. If we look at the value of Standard & Poor organization in the past 50 years, the ratio between your assets, intangible assets, and non-intangible assets has radically changed from 17% in the early 70s to 90% in 2020. What that means is there is a significant amount of the value, the capital value of organization that goes beyond the physical asset and resides in intellectual property, human capital, or organizational culture, and require a structured way to steer and to set a direction and a tone. Building a little bit further on this concept, it becomes very important to start and understand and make an effort to understand how the intangible assets can be explained. This slide trying to summarize and make it simple how we can go about doing it. Fundamentally, the intangible value of organization can be explained by looking at this dimension there in addition to the financial metrics. Start looking at the customer value, people and societal value. We were talking about just before with Dr. Lim about the people value, the planet value, in addition to prosperity. Now, there are just few examples of drivers on this slide, but the concept I think is pretty clear. There is a need to start understanding of how we can generate and increase the intangible value of organization by putting our effort and our heart and commitment on other dimensions, how we attract people to work for our organization, how we generate value for an audience and customers. They are more connected, more knowledgeable, and they're asking us to take a stand when it comes to big themes of our era, such as the climate change, such as work ethics, and such as the policies or the practices in human exploitation, specifically in a certain area of the world. Now, the beauty of our interconnected society is that something that happens on the side of the world immediately has repercussion overnight on the other side of the world. So bad practices that are used in maybe in the Philippines or in other developing area of the world immediately have a repercussion on the ability for organization to be selling their products in Europe or in the Americas. Now, changing slightly gear, but continuing on the key themes of this conference of how we move and what are the key characteristics of the next generation leader, we set the scene about the need to move from a short-term view focused on profit to a longer-term view focused on people and planet. But setting a strategy and setting a direction is not enough. As important it is to find a way to really generate and to make traction. Now, my background, my over 20 years of experience in this field, there is no doubt that any transformation will require sooner or later the use of a technology. And technology likely in the recent years has evolved so much that allows us to make bets that we couldn't dream of a few years back. Technologies today allows us to make bets and hopefully achieve targets that were set with the Paris Agreement in 2015, and they were not thinkable or achievable just a few years back. Key message that I captured on this slide is also of the 169 targets that are included within the United Nations development goals. More than 100 can be achieved by the use of technology. So future leaders definitely need to be well versed into how technology can help them to set the tone and to achieve the goals and the ambition to leave behind a more just and a better planet. Following up on my promise at the beginning of my speech of having and closing up with a summary of what I think are the key traits of the leader of tomorrow, I put together these slides. So I think there are three key messages in the first one, the need to move from a short-term to a long-term mindset, making sustainable, transformative, and transformational in nature. The second concept is change is here to stay, and the pace of change will probably continue to increase, and with it is complexity. What that means is that future leaders will need to embrace this as a matter of fact, and will need to develop a mindset that allows them to consistently be able to evolve and to set new targets and new ambitions. Finally, the complexity of the world that we live in, it is as such that it's not possible to do this in isolation. It is extremely important to establish a network, an ecosystem that allows us to be successful and to work together toward the common goal of leaving behind a better and more just world. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Claudio, for that very insightful and relevant presentation. The ideas that you've discussed have probably made our CEOs and leaders in the audience to think, how will my organization be truly successful in a world where societies will demand greater responsibility from organizations, where capital and talent will shift to organizations that drive broad-based prosperity by creating value for shareholders, customers, employees, and societies alike? You called this creating long-term value, and you discussed the shift in satisfying not only shareholders, but a broader base of stakeholders. However, a lot of organizations are far from this state, right? And a number are still focused on short term profits or making it quarter by quarter. So, my first question for you is, how critical is it that we think long term? And what advice can you give to the young and next generation CEOs who might find all of this daunting, uh, around this required shift in mindset from focusing on the short term to one that emphasizes creation of long term value?
Thank you, Rossana. Quite frankly, I don't think it's an option. I think the pressure that we are receiving will make it like a compulsory only way to go. We can't any longer just focus on shares. The value of our shares, the value of our organization is going to be driven and built out by how organizations relate and the value that they generate for the community where they operate. It is not possible for organizations to attract and retain capital if they are not responding and they are not bold enough to make decisions that may come to a cost to start with. But the long term is the generation of value because I have more motivated talent working for my organization. And I have an impact in the society that resonates with younger generation and will result in more satisfied consumers. Consumers are more informed. Consumers have at their disposal, we said, a computer in your pocket, information and a quantity of data that allows them to be insightful in a way that wasn't before. Sentiment analysis today is one of the tools that are used by all organizations to kind of shape and direct their strategic decision of what they want to be and how they build their brand. There is a lot of talking about purpose. Purpose is no longer and cannot be selling shares at a higher price or building, increasing the value, the financial value of the organization. It has to be around what is the purpose of existence of my organization? What I want to be known for? What is the legacy that me being here and operating will have, not just as a brand, but for the people that work for me, people that purchase my product. So again, I don't think in the future this will even be a choice. It will be the only way organization can be viable and can be viable in the long term.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Can you share some insights into how organizations are responding to increasing pressure on social and environmental responsibility in your role as our sustainability and technology transformation leader in Asia Pac?
Yes. Yes. Most definitely, there is a shift and there is an increased attention to themes related to sustainability and long-term value. And that is visible every day. I guess I think organizations have now a standing item on the agenda of the board's discussion around the world, and that is about what we are doing on the sustainability ESG space, how we create value for the long term. That is driven, as I said before, from a number of reasons. Pressure from society that is reflected in an increase in regulation. Different regions in the world are moving at a different pace. In this area, probably Europe is taking a little bit more of a lead, but others are following suit. There has been a proliferation of standards. The challenge, and what EY, in one of the many surveys that we conduct, we definitely have noticed in the past 5 years an improvement in the reporting of along those standards. We look at two dimensions from that perspective. One in the scope, so a number of metrics that organizations choose to report against. The other is the quality of this report. Now, there is a lot of work to do in the report in the quality area. And hopefully, as I mentioned before, the announcement of the International Sustainability Standard Board, COP26, will make a significant step in that direction by helping organizations to define and how to better report and how to pick on what are the most relevant metrics given their geography, given their industry they operate. Pressure is increasing, is not an option, and that is really visible. Organizations around the world are appointing chief sustainability officers, and they are no longer reporting to a finance function. They are reporting directly to the board or to the CEO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, noted on the programs and initiatives of companies, right, around the world to respond to this growing responsibility. But my question is, at this point, are organizations doing enough? We have seen reactions and response of very influential climate activists to the COP26 conference, calling it as a PR exercise. What are your thoughts around this, and how can we somehow bridge the gap between the younger generation's expectations and the efforts that businesses are undertaking right now? Do you have an opinion to that?
I have an opinion, I have a strong view. Are we doing enough? No, we are not.
Okay.
There's a long way to go.
Yeah.
But President Obama, a couple of days ago, gave a speech to COP26 and he stated he really likes what the young generation are doing and invited them to keep being angry. That will have a fantastic and incredible pressure on government around the world to take more an action. Yes, there is a lot of talking about today about organization doing greenwashing. So reporting for the sake of reporting, using offsetting as opposed to really abating of carbon emission. And that's true. I mean, it is happening, and that's what it requires consensus and a coordinated effort of many stakeholders to change. It is reality of things. Currently, and for a long time, sustainability has been considered more as a compliance need, but it is evolving, and I am noticing that change and that shift. Again, may not be consistent. More certain industries could take the lead, and I think no surprise that heavy asset industry that rely heavily on carbon have more challenges to make that transition. But other organizations can lead by example. And look, science-based targets are a fantastic thing, but if you can do better than that, why not? And that is the approach that EY is taking. So EY is going carbon negative this year, and it will go net zero by 2025. It is easier for us. We are not heavy asset kind of industry, but I think the approach, the mindset is exactly what I said. We can do it, so why shouldn't we? And with that, we hope we lead by example, and we want to help our clients and others around the world to follow suit.
Well, thank you very much, Claudio, for the sharing and the insights. I think we don't have any questions from the audience. So, any last words from you, Claudio, before we leave the stage?
Look, I was again very pleased to be with you guys today. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and motivating new generation to make a difference is something that is very close to my heart. So I will continue my job of helping and supporting new generation of leaders to do what I really believe is important, coming together to save our world.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.